Okay, yesterday we were looking at the timeline of the period when George Washington lived, and we looked at the first page, which looks at the first half of his life, if you will, and we looked at things that occurred in his life, in the life of the nation, and in the world. So let's look on the next page, which is page 5, handout page 5. And first of all, let's look at the life of George Washington and pick out what are the things that stand out there. From 1794 through 1799, and under George Washington. Let's look there first. Sally?
In 1796, Washington refuses to run for a third term and delivers his farewell address.
Okay, why is that significant?
Because that was the only leader, like president that America had ever had, was not going to find somebody else.
Yeah, and why is that important that they have to find somebody else? Wouldn't it have been better if he just kept going?
They needed to know how to run the country.
Okay, you can't just let George do it all the time. You got to let somebody else take over and provide that transition. What precedent did that set for future presidents? Michaela?
Only 2 terms in office.
Yeah. After that, presidents never served more than 2 terms in office until someone who thought that we just couldn't get along without him. FDR, Franklin Roosevelt. He was elected to how many terms? 4. He was elected 4 times. Died during that 4th term. And now there's an amendment to the Constitution which prevents a president from being elected to more than 2 consecutive terms. The word consecutive is important. So in reality, former President Obama could come back and run again. Former President Bill Clinton, he's still not too old. It's interesting, there's never been any kind of push for that. Okay, what else? Under Washington, in Washington's life, what else stands out? It's pretty much all downhill from there. One more thing I think that we could point out that's important. Sally, what do you think?
He died in 1799.
Okay, his death is relatively important. I will grant you that. Okay, anything else?
When we went to his house, it was like really depressing because they said his wife died without like any family. They said that like all of her children had died by then.
Oh yeah, her children, yeah. Grandchildren were still alive.
But she died like alone.
Yeah.
That's pretty depressing.
Well, except the grandchildren
But then I met
were
her,
raised.
so, like,
We're going to see in the movie that George Washington and his wife Martha raised their grandchildren as their own in the absence of parents who had died. So they were like children in a way. So they were still there. Okay, so anything else? I think it's kind of important to look at the next to the last thing before his death, that when he drafted his will, he provided for the freeing of his slaves and measures to ease their transition to freedom, which would be effective at Martha's death. So that was a pretty big deal at the time. And we'll see the struggles he goes through with that in the movie. Okay, let's look at America. What stands out in America as important in those years? What are the major events you think? Joey?
In 1794, the U.S. Navy is established.
All right, that's important. Have a Navy. Stephen?
the post office is firmly established in 1795.
Okay. Important to have a post office. Sally?
Alexander Hamilton resigned from the cabinet in 1795.
Okay, why does that stand out to you?
Well, because Hamilton was the first Secretary of Treasury, and he basically put together the financial system, and kind of similarly to when George Washington stepped down, from being president again, like he was the only one who had done that job.
Mhm.
So anytime the first guy leaves, it's gonna be a bit difficult for the second person.
Okay. He was a very important figure in that cabinet. Steph?
1796, John Adams is elected president and Thomas Jefferson vice president.
Okay, why does that stand out?
Because it's another president, not George Washington.
Yeah, and there was a transition from one ruler to another without any violence, without any attempt to overthrow, no assassinations, a peaceful transition of power. Okay, what else? Anything else? Michaela?
In 1797, the XYZ takes place.
Okay, why does that stand out to you?
Well, I don't really know what the XYZ affair is, but I know it's important.
All right, if we don't know what it is, let's push that aside until we get to it. No one in 1794 has picked out the use of powder on men's hair goes out of fashion. You didn't think that was an important thing? I'm just kidding you. All right, I think everything there is somewhat important, but I think those are the major things. All right, how about the world? What stands out to you as the major events in the world from 1794 to 1799? Alex?
In 1799, the Rosetta Stone was found in Egypt.
What's the Rosetta Stone?
Like had all the English, the language translations, so you could like understand.
You remember what languages were on the Rosetta Stone?
I'm assuming there are hieroglyphics on there.
Hieroglyphics was on there, and what else?
Hieroglyphics, Greek and Latin.
Right, and because there are 3 languages on there, and no one knew how to translate hieroglyphics before, and so that enabled, for the first time, modern people to translate hieroglyphics. So that was pretty important for worldwide understanding of Egypt. What else stands out? Caleb?
1795, Napoleon becomes commander-in-chief of the French army.
Okay, Napoleon Bonaparte. He has a major effect on Europe, right? And on the United States too, as we'll see. Stephen?
Edward Jenner developed inoculation against smallpox.
That's pretty important.
Lots
Why?
of people would die.
Yeah, smallpox killed a lot of people, and that prevented the spread of smallpox. Anything else? All right, so the composing of Old Lang Syne doesn't stand out to you? No. Did you sing it this year on New Year's? Do you know what that song is? Should old acquaintance be forgot? That's Old Lang Syne. All right.
It's almost your song.
I think that's probably most of the important things. One thing I want to point out to you, just because you probably never heard of him, but I'll ask, any of you ever heard of the painter Goya? De Goya is in 1797. He completed his Maha paintings, which are of a woman lying there. So I remember he completed one painting of her clothed and one in the nude. I'm not sure which one was his private collection, but I became aware of De Goya when I was in high school. I think in Spanish class, we probably saw some things by Goya. I started doing research and looked in the library, and he did a lot. He did paintings like that, but he also did a lot of drawings. So I don't know if it's charcoal or pencil drawings of war that was taking place in Spain as Napoleon invaded Spain, and some of the atrocities that the French army committed in Spain. And so if you like gruesome, grotesque images, look up Goya. He drew them as it was. He has another famous painting, which I can't remember the name of it, which shows some Spanish citizens being put before a firing squad of French soldiers. Goya, he also drew a picture of, was it Cronus eating his children? The god, wasn't it Cronus that did that?
Yeah.
Yeah, he drew Cronus biting off in the head of one of his children, whatever. So if you're into that kind of thing, and I wouldn't suggest that you should be, but guys are kind of drawn to that more than girls are. So that might be if you don't like art, that might be a form of art that you would be drawn to. All right. So the other things important there too, but we'll reserve those for another time. Let's look now at handout number 10. I'm sorry, handout number 5. Handout number 5. Oh, that was 5. Okay, hold on a second. Yeah, continue on there. A couple of the questions I want to ask you. In the 18th and 19th centuries, there have been those that have called them centuries of revolution, because there's a lot of different kinds of revolution taking place during this. So as you're looking on the timeline, pages 4 and 5, what on that timeline supports the idea that these were centuries of revolution? Devin?
The French Revolution.
The French Revolution. What else? Alex?
Like steam-powered cotton processing machine.
Yeah, what revolution was that a part of? Industrial Revolution, right. Anything else? Michaela?
In 1792, Mary Bolson's vindication of the rights of women.
The rights of women. So that was revolutionary, talking about the rights of women.
What are those? I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm joking.
Joking is going to get you in trouble one of these days.
I know.
Michaela?
Roman Catholicism is banned in France. So like,
Oh, that was part of the French Revolution, wasn't it? Is it listed there close to that? Yeah, so that was revolutionary. Anything else that was revolutionary? Alex?
The first, like, 4-person submarine, the Nautilus.
All right. I would consider that kind of part of the Industrial Revolution, but that was certainly a unique thing. Lahana, you have something else?
slave trade led by
Toussaint,
Toussaint.
the Overture.
Toussaint and Overture revolted against the French.
Yeah, slave revolt in Haiti. There's a revolution there where they overthrow their masters. Who thought that could happen? All right, so lots of revolution in thinking, and of course, many people call our war for independence a revolution, and it was in the sense of a new way of looking at government, or at least maybe not the ideas have been around, but a new way of implementing government that had not been used before. But it wasn't revolution in the sense of overthrowing a government, as you know. There were some documents that were written during these years concerning human rights. Somebody mentioned already Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights of Women in 1792. What are some other documents that you see on this timeline concerning human rights? Sarah?
In 1791, the first part of Rights of Man is published by Thomas Paine.
Yeah, Thomas Paine's Rights of Man. Okay. What else? Look in America, 1791. You see the word rights there. The Bill of Rights, right, in our U.S. Constitution would be considered that. And what I mentioned before, even Washington's will was a document that had to do with rights too, because he freed his slaves, gave them rights. All right, we talked about the Industrial Revolution, and I think, Alex, you're the one who brought up the steam engine, right?
Yeah.
As the kind of the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. There's one other invention on here, besides the submarine. There's another invention that would be considered part of the Industrial Revolution too. What was that, Alex?
Cotton gin.
The cotton gin, right. And gin, of course, short for engine. You didn't know that?
How big is my one?
What was that?
No, it's nothing.
Are you making jokes again?
No.
Well, at least not funny ones.
I wasn't making a joke.
Whoa.
I was just stating the facts.
All right, I think we are ready to begin. We've got the background. We're ready maybe now to begin watching this presentation of George Washington Forging a Nation. This is going to pick up prior to ratification of the Constitution. So we'll get some of that background before we get into the life of Washington, or Washington's effect upon the nation as the first president. So we need the door closed and the lights out. That seems a little dark. It's any better. Okay.
I stood there.
So you recognize any actors' names from many years ago? So it makes sense. Also, while we're watching, you should have your pages open that have the different characters so that you can keep them straight. Handout 6 and 7 has some of the characters. Because as we go along, it's going to be important to be able to delineate who is who. Oh, I lost it. Did I? What happened?
Won a war against Britain to become the first democratic government. Still threatened by foreign tyrannies, a constitution was proposed in 1787 to bind the 13 states into one vital nation. Some feared the document would lead to an American king. Others had faith in one man who could unify the nation and keep the dream of the American Revolution alive. George Washington.
Okay, how many people have been to Mount Vernon?
I've been there.
Hey.
Almost all of you. And I think it's really neat that they filmed it right there. You'll recognize some of the buildings there.
I've been there. I'm in this.
Stephen, have you been there?
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing a half dozen times.
Mm-hmm.
Say that, and the invincible Billy will make royal gifts to his ears. That'll get a good smell of her. That's it. That's it. One last boy. We'll entice his Royal Highness with this young Jenny here. If he becomes aroused, we'll quickly substitute the mare to become.
That might work, sir.
You, the animal of the future.
So this country already has a bountiful supply of jackasses. Those damn fool politicians who are trying to prevent the Constitution from being ratified by the states.
All right, he's making a play on words there. Because Washington is attempting to mate his horse with a donkey. Is that right?
Good save.
So that you get a mule or a jackass is the term for that. So this guy is making a sort of a play. You know, Washington's attempting to create a jackass here in the corral, and he's saying we already have plenty of them that are involved in working against the Constitution, the ratification.
I still can't believe that our own giants like Patrick Henry and George Mason still oppose this. Ironic that war can bind men together only to have peace pull them apart. This new form of government, uniting 13 states into one nation, as called for in that Constitution, I believe is the last chance man may have to demonstrate that he's capable of ruling himself. How are the children's studies going?
Well, sir, young Wash is having some difficulty with his sums.
He's as stubborn as the mule we hope to be born of this frustrating affair.
Sir, you must lend yourself to the first years of any new government.
Have you been talking with Mr. Hamilton?
No.
Mr. Madison? It may be a simple problem, but I won't be pushed by anyone. Time for your ride?
Yes, Grandpapa.
All right. Democrat.
All right, these two children are the children of Martha Washington's son, who died. He and his wife died. And Martha's name before marrying George was Custis. That was her married name, Martha Custis. This boy was named after George Washington, so it was after George had married Martha, and so his name is George Washington Custis. So the nickname was Wash, short for his middle name. And the girl is Jenny, if I remember correctly. So George adopted them as his children. They're his step-grandchildren, but he was such a kind man that he adopted them. Yeah.
So he never had any kids of his own?
Never had any children of his own.
Wow.
How many of you have been to Arlington Cemetery? All right. How many of you went to the Custis Lee Mansion? Really? You didn't go to the big house there that's in the cemetery? I'll tell you a little bit more about that later, but that was built by George Washington Custis. That's where the Custis comes from in the Custis Lee Mansion. The Lee comes from Robert E. Lee, who married George Washington Custis's daughter.
Come on. Count step.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Mr. Patrick Henry has the floor. Where has the genius of America fled that we should bow to so unholy a document? Mr. Madison speaks of checks and balances. What good, sir, are specious imaginary balances? Rope dancing, chain rattling, ridiculous checks and contrivances. And who has authorized
so persuasive that I feel my presence to ensure that I am in cuffs when I'm already
It
biting
is the stage through which the people must speak, and Mr. Madison knows that.
Sir, I object.
You, sir, and your Federalists have tried to scare us with what will happen to Virginia if we reject your Constitution. Maryland and Pennsylvania will descend on us from the north. The Indians will attack us from the rear, and Carolinians from the south, mounted on alligators, I presume, will destroy our cornfields and eat up our little children. A consolidated government means a government by force and the death of liberty. The tax power will enslave our people. I tell you, my friends, God himself would vote against this diabolical instrument. You see, he has spoken.
Yes, sir. He objects, sir, to your intemperate speech.
Gentlemen, let us adjourn till the Almighty allows us to hear our own voices, if not those of our opponents.
I commend you for your eloquence, Mr. Henry. We agree. The document is imperfect, but it is the best that can be gotten at this time.
Your best, Governor Randolph, is my worst. Where is the Bill of Rights to protect our liberties?
Sir, the door is open for amendment.
We can add later the protections we all want.
I say on the second constitutional convention to hear the real will of the people.
And the letter is an invitation to chaos. We have put in 5 torturous months to get this far. We cannot survive without a stronger government. The states fighting states, territories,
Perhaps before the final vote, we could reach a compromise. You, sir, trumpeted your refusal to endorse the damnable document in Philadelphia. Now in Richmond, you sing its praises. Can your recent visit to the august George Washington at Mount Vernon have anything to do with such perfidious inconstancy?
by God, sir, if George Washington agrees to serve,
That great man's integrity will burn away all your knee-quaking fears of a king. I shall oppose ratification to my last breath, sir. And with that, then you damn this nation to chaos and anarchy and an ultimate decision by the sword.
Stitches? 2 tiny stitches? And 1 across.
Like this one?
Excellent. Only you have clever fingers and the mind to match.
You make it easy with our man.
sir, Mr. Handouts coach is approaching.
You're concerned about bad news from Richmond?
If Virginia rejects its constitution, I'd be devastated, of course. But if they ratify,
They'll want you to serve the new nation.
we've been so happy here since the war. The last thing either of us wants is to leave Mount Vernon.
George, if you feel it's your duty,
My duty is to you, and to Nellie and young boy.
with their father dead, they're very fortunate to have such a wonderful grandfather.
Even if I did consent, I've led men in battle, but to be the chief executive of a new form of government, I'm not sure I'm the man.
Oh, you are. But do you want to be?
You know, if I accept this office, I'd have to borrow money to travel to New York.
You wouldn't.
We are land poor. It's not a very auspicious beginning to a presidency.
General Washington. Yeah. Virginia has ratified. We have a constitution, a new government.
General Washington, congratulations.
And to you, Governor Randolph. Congratulations.
And to you, Mr. Madison, Mr. Monroe, sir. And now the greatest challenge lies ahead of us. We are the only nation in the world without a king or an emperor.
The Europeans predict we'll tear ourselves apart like wild animals.
Rhode Island, New York, and South Carolina all threaten not to join the Union. Only George Washington, as president, can make us one nation.
One thing that, as you saw that scene there, that was a little bit inaccurate is that Madison and Monroe were much shorter. I don't remember the exact height, but it's like 5'4", 5'6", and Washington was over 6 feet, so there would have been a distinct difference as they were talking there. But you know, it's hard to find short actors unless you would have put Tom Cruise in. But he was just a kid at the time this was made, I think. Maybe. All right, so that's the beginning of George Washington. We'll continue watching tomorrow. If at any time we're watching, they use a term, say something that you don't understand, please make sure that you raise your hand and stop. Even if it's something we've already talked about and you just don't remember, let's make sure we understand what's going on. This is not just for entertainment. Okay, this is for you to learn the situations, the circumstances of the beginning of our country. Any questions about what you've seen today? Try to keep these guys separate in your minds as to who is who as well as we go along. All right, no assignment for tomorrow. We'll continue watching.